Hello, everybody. So, yeah, my cat and I are here to give you the overview of our last unit of chemistry here for the first semester. My cat Puddin, by the way, you'll see her wandering around. But I figured I'd give you a quick introduction to overview of what's going on in this last unit. It's definitely bigger than the first unit. That first one was just more of a warm up. This is more of a real unit with kind of a variety of things that you got to do for this. So I want to make sure you have a chance to see what it is. So hopefully right now you're kind of seeing my screen. And you can kind of see I've got the March 22nd to April 2nd unit that's up there. So let me lead you through what you got going on here. So first of all, you've got your standards assignment for this particular unit. And in this unit, we've got three big ideas. There was actually originally supposed to be five. One of them is pretty intense, so I kind of have trimmed it down. So 7A, we're going to kind of skip over. 7B is about basically learning how to write chemical equations, identifying reactants and products, and being able to kind of use some word clues. It also has you write some formulas. So I'll remind you that as you're trying to do this part, go look back in that previous unit. Actually, I'll repost it and get that polyatomic ions chart. You can use your resources for this chapter. Make sure to use those. Look up your formulas, look up your charges. But that's what 7B is about, is basically sort of reviewing how to write names and formulas and to put them in chemical equation form. 7C is a little bit more of a typical kind of thing where you're going to be balancing chemical equations. This is where you're going to have to learn how to use coefficients, numbers out in front, to make sure that your atoms in equals atoms out. And this is definitely one of those things that is a little bit, it's kind of mathy feeling. And for some students, they kind of find it challenging. And then other students, it's pretty straightforward to them. So don't leave it to the last minute. 8D, we're going to skip for now. We may come back to that after spring break. And then 8E is actually about identifying some different types of chemical reactions. We can classify a lot of them into types that are called synthesis and decomposition, single displacement, etc. So the balancing equations worksheet has some examples of it. And then 8E is about just sort of describing what they are. And there's a project that goes along with that. Cat, really? Really? Nobody wants to see you. So those are the standards. So there's pretty much three standards that you need to work from on here. I've got the video lessons that are posted up for this. I have to do a video for 8E. I have not done that yet. So I've got 7B and 7C up there. 7A is covered in the final activity as well. So I left it up there anyway, but you don't have to do the standard for 7A. Like I said, it's covered in one of the other activities. But there's 7B and 7C in terms of writing chemical equations and then balancing those chemical equations. And then you can see right here, I've got a set of 4 different assignments for you to work on. One of them, and each one of them is pretty much directly related to one of those standards. So this one, assignment number 1, is directly related to standard 7B. It's about learning how to write chemical equations. So this is a series of basically word problems. The first page has got a bunch of just references and instructions on there for you to use as you're practicing doing this. So you've got a resource right there. But there's 15, I believe, problems that are on here that you end up having to do. Basically, you're reading, I get it to scroll down here, where you are reading an example of a problem. There we go. And then you're doing some color coding to identify what the reactants and the products are. And then you're practicing writing formulas and writing them as chemical equations. So like I said, this is partially a review assignment in the sense of writing formulas, but I know you're probably a little bit rusty on that. And then part of it is definitely that reading the news story, reading the practice problems. They start off easier, they get harder. This is intended to be a group problem. So please get a partner, work with another person as you're doing this one. You don't feel like you have to do this yourself, all by yourself anyway. I'd rather you find a partner and either Snapchat or make a Google Meet for each other, whatever you got to do to be able to get going on that one. So that was what this assignment is. You're color coding this. And again, I used mine blue here for reactants. Pink is kind of my verb words that are telling which way the reaction's going. And then green is my products, or the words that indicate the products. Like I said, they start off pretty straightforward. The later 5 or so get a little bit more challenging. Okay, problem number 2, or assignment number 2, is about balancing chemical equations. So now that you had a little bit of practice writing equations, now you actually have to figure out how to go through and balance it. In this particular assignment, I've given you all the equations. You don't have to write them. This is more of a math type assignment where you're counting and trying to identify how many of each type are present. So in this, on the blanks, you can just write your coefficients on these blanks that are in here. Not every assignment, or not every blank needs to be filled. In fact, a lot of them, you're just sort of assuming a 1 is there, but you don't necessarily have to put something on every single blank. If you prefer to print this off and do it on paper and upload a copy of it, that's fine. If you want to do it on a separate piece of paper and then upload a picture of it, also fine, don't really care. But this is the idea of balancing equations. This also leads you into the last standard, which is 8E. I've got these balanced equations kind of by set for these different types of reactions. So I'm going to ask you to look at these, kind of draw some conclusions about the patterns. Like, what are the things that are the same about every one of these single displacement reactions? What are some of the similarities between these equations that aren't in the other ones? And that's what I'll have you do this last part. The generalized part is actually about drawing some of those conclusions. And this is actually helps you do standard 8E in terms of describing some of these general forms. So this particular standard here is kind of a picky one. Make sure that you're solid on balancing equations. I'll hold some Zoom or Google Meet get-togethers to practice doing this skill, because it can throw some students off. And then the last assignment number 3, is a big group project. So this is something that you should work with a couple of friends. You do not need to do this by yourself unless you want to. I mean, if you're like happy just cruising along on your own, go for it. But you are welcome to work with a couple of friends that's on there. And then what I'm having you do in this one is to create a Google slide deck that has to do with those different types of equations that are listed in that other assignment. So there's a couple of informative slides at the beginning that just give you some basic information. Like the first one kind of gives you the overview of what you're doing. Slide number 3 here tells you what the 6 different types of reactions are, kind of lists them all off in one place, and kind of gives you this general format for them. It'll help you kind of identify what we're looking for, as well as a couple word description of them. And then there's also a slide in here that tells you what the different signs of a chemical reaction are. Like, how do you know if a chemical reaction is occurring, or if it's just some sort of a physical change. So anyway, there's just, again, some background information that's on there. And then you get into the 6 different slides themselves. So there's 6 pairs of slides, a pair for each of the types of chemical equations, and my cat. So like reaction type number 1 is called synthesis reactions. I'm asking you to go find some pictures on either YouTube or Google to find some examples of some of these different kinds of problems. So go find some cool stuff. Go down the rabbit hole. Go find some cool reactions, stuff starting on fire, or giving off some heat, or making sparks, or doing weird crap that chemistry does. I want you to give me that background information. So in here, I need you to include 3 different pictures. Picture of the reactants, what it looked like before. Picture of the reaction, so something kind of in progress. And then a picture of the product, what it looked like when it's done. So 3 pictures for each reaction. I'm going to ask you to name or give me the formulas of the reactants versus the product. And then I'm going to have you use what are those types of evidence. Again, remember there's a slide at the beginning that lists off the 4 types of evidence: change in color, change in temperature, formation of a solid or a precipitate, formation of a gas or bubbling, effervescence. And then what is the balanced chemical equation for that reaction? So you may have to do some work to figure that out. Don't pick reactions that just look cool that you can't find any background information on. It'll just make your life harder. So again, find some information, go down the Google rabbit hole and find some cool stuff. And then after each one of those things, I have a second slide, sorry, for each one, come back here, that asks you to do an example. So I'm going to ask you to do an example of a synthesis reaction. Like here I'm saying, what's the synthesis between magnesium and oxygen gas? And I'm going to have you write the balanced equation for that. So predict what the products would be. Is there one product or more than one product? Make sure when you're writing your formulas or your products that you're balancing your charges, using your subscripts correctly. Use your resources to get that right. Write your chemical equation with the reactants on the left, plus, and then an arrow to the products on the right, and then make sure that your overall equation is balanced. So there's 6 different pairs like this where I'm giving you an equation to go look up and find, or a reaction type, go find some videos, some pictures, something like that, find something cool. And then there's a single example problem that you have to write and balance for each one. So again, there's 6 of these. So make sure to find a partner. Like I said, don't feel like you need to work by yourself, but like I said, if you feel like it, go for it. But this is the biggest assignment of the whole unit, and it requires you to kind of use a lot of synthesis things. So this is kind of like our test. You won't have a separate test too much on this. I'll give you a couple of balanced equations as a final assessment. But this is by far the biggest assignment that you've got on here. And then the other thing that I post up here is a lab simulation. It'll help you learn how to practice balancing equations. So this is something you should want to do kind of fairly early on. And it's got a little game component to it, a couple of examples. And then it just asks you to find, how many points did you get. Your grade is not based on how many points you get, so don't bother lying about it. I don't really care how many points you get. There's a couple of kind of follow-up questions on here, more like a journal sort of thing, where it's just going to ask you, like, how'd you do? Why were they harder? Were any of them challenging? So again, it's just more of a documentation that you participated in that virtual lab. So again, it's definitely a longer unit, definitely more things to do. You need to get started on this, and you kind of need to do them sort of in assignment order. So assignment number 1, that assigning reactants and products, you need to have that done probably around Monday. Sunday I'll probably try to do a meet or record another little video on there. For assignment number 2, the balancing equations, and then the virtual lab on balancing equations, that's getting into like Tuesday, by the time that you're getting that done. And that leaves you Wednesday and Thursday to get this big group assignment done. But don't leave us all to the last minute. We're coming up real close to the end of the semester here. So you want to make sure you're giving yourself enough time to kind of pace yourself through all these assignments. And again, I'll hold some kind of meets, some get-togethers, office hours, that kind of stuff. We can ask questions. But if you wait till the last minute, there's not much I can do to help you. You got to actually kind of work your way through this and be ready to go. So there you go, guys. I hope you're doing well, and good luck with these assignments. Let me know what I can do to help you out. Just try not to wait. You got to get going on this. Pick away a little bit at a time. So you're not going on all Thursday trying to scramble to get all this stuff in, because there's just not a lot of time. I'll remind everybody that Friday is the end of the semester, so we're pretty much done with the semester. We'll have a week off next week, and then we'll be able to talk about how we're going to restart grades and give you an idea how this is going to go. But this is a real unit, though, so give yourself some time, spread it out, pace yourself. Don't do it all at the last minute. Get some help, work with friends, work with your resources, and I'll be seeing you as we go. Okay. All right. So hang in there. Spread kindness, not charisma, and I will see y'all on one of our Zoom meets. Bye, guys.